Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the community, because another reason I wanted to talk to you folks is, I think it's a solid hour drive away from Madison.
Hmm.
You're sort of, you're in a agricultural setting there, and you draw from a broad community. So I was sort of interested in hearing a little bit more about your community, and maybe, whether you think there's any differences in the challenges you face in teaching, but also whether this way that we use land is maybe even more relevant to your students. You have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the main ones is the amount of farming families there are. So that really applies to that agriculture map because a lot of the area, especially around town, is being used for agriculture, whether it's field or livestock. So I think that that map specifically relates a little bit to Reedsburg specifically. I mean, I know there's a lot of farming communities, but just being I don't know what the percentage is, but just a lot of our students come from that background, and I think that kind of resonated with them a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
as a challenge, I think there's a lot of students that some of them could say that they're just going to work on their parents' farm, so they don't care as much about school as
Hmm.
you probably would want them to. So, as a specific challenge, I think that's definitely one of them.
Yeah, well, I think along those lines, one of the things that I thought was so interesting about your school, and here you are, Drew, walking up to it, is that your district actually has a forested property that is
Hmm.
part of the school district land. So, um, tell me a little bit about the Hartshee Center and these lands that that the school has.
So, and you can't see my mouse, but if you look down at the bottom where you actually have the map there,
Yeah.
the white and red trail is the original land. That was about 80 or so acres that of donated land from Virgil, and I can't remember his wife's name, Harchi, which was donated to the school as just like a learning center. And then
Sure.
additionally, they added across the street, you can see like the little blue trail and the yellow trail and whatnot, and that was added with it. So it's a total of like 140 acres of um, of forested land that's I mean it's managed a little bit. There is logging that goes on, but it's for the most part managed as like um, a wildlife sanctuary area. So there's no hunting or anything going
Yeah.
on in there.
Well,
The
that's
fish in the
super.
pond are catch and release. So
Yeah, I mean, having that, so you've just your school literally has its own outdoor classroom, and you can kind of, in a way, you can almost live the half Earth notion, right? This land can be managed in part for conserving, maximizing biodiversity. How do you end up
mhm.
using the land? I'm going to advance one more slide just to show that there is an indoor classroom there, and so I just want to hear a little bit about how your students interact with this property and how they make use of it.
Um, Specifically us, I know Rachel and I have taken kids out there at least once. I know we did a tree identification lab where we went out there. But I know the elementary schools, there's kids out there or were kids out there before quarantine. Kids that going out there probably like once a week or once every other week or so. And they were using it for a whole various activities, whether it's they were going out and building quinzies. I know when we walked out there, there were kind of half melted quinzies out in the open field where kids built those for like a winter shelter lesson.
Yeah, and you were saying that there's some service learning going on in trail maintenance and some of those kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, the facility itself too is used for cross country. So, I mean, the trails are managed pretty well, so kids aren't getting hurt when they're doing cross country meets because there's some washout in areas and stuff because the terrain does change. But they yeah, we have had students out there fixing trails and taking trees and taking invasives out and stuff like that. Fix or cutting up trees that might have fallen over a trail. So there's maintenance on that front as well. And there were activities planned out there for Earth Day before that was canceled. So
Yeah.
um, so yeah, there's a lot of student engagement out there in general for
Mhm.
the district.
Yeah, I know last year we took all of the biology kids out there during the spring, and we played kind of a trophic level interaction game all throughout Harchie to kind of talk about the different, the energy pyramid and the transfer of energy between different trophic levels. So we used it kind of as our gaming site there. And then, yeah, I know the previous teacher before Drew that was in charge of Harchie, her name was Amy, and she did a lot of work with, we have a lot of buckthorn, so she would take
Mm.
kids there and they did a lot of invasive species removal with the buckthorn and
Yeah.
things like that. We did like water testing at the stream there, and there's a lot of potential. There definitely is a lot of potential that we would love to get kids out there more and more.
Well,
Well, and one
hopefully,
thing I'd like to add to that quick, when I was at NEBT, I went to one of the talks about BioBlitz, where you'd go out on a BioBlitz and you'd use iNaturalist, and that was something that I wanted to get kids out there and do, and get them trying to locate and find different species of animal, plant, lichen, fungus, whatever it was that they could find. And that was something that I definitely wanted to do as we got closer and closer to it being warm out spring for students. But so yeah, there were plans to use it more.
I'd love it if the Half Earth Project could be an inspiration for documenting what's on this property, keeping track of it, and maybe using some of our resources to even know what should live there. Drew, you mentioned that, the forest is managed, and there's, when we toured the site, there were different groves of trees.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the cool things is there's a nice stand of maple, and there's actually a sugar house there. So
Mm-hmm.
here's the sugar house, and then here's Drew actually doing some work to that the steel bin that your ladder's right next to there. That's where the sap is coming in from the sap lines, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's just the siphon to take it inside to the cooker, which is on the right hand side.
Yeah.
Um, and I just found it so awesome that you guys actually, showing how um, you can get use out of a land like this, but in a way that's not destructive to the environment. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that one of the volunteers there, when I was asking about the maple syrup, he said to me that the fourth grade owns the maple syrup.
Cool. The fourth graders get first dibs. It's their project. They're the ones that they come out and they tap all the trees. They collect all the syrup. We're coming out at that time like 2 or 3 times a week, and filling buckets and taking them back and putting it in the bulk tank or whatever they were doing. And then they were getting tours on how the actual boiling process works. And they get first, like I said, they get first dibs. Their parents get first dibs on buying syrup. All the fourth grade teachers, all the fourth grade students get first dibs on that syrup. And then it goes out to, they kind of use it as like a bake sale. They sell
Yeah.
to whoever wants to buy the extra.
So it's a fundraiser, and so they learn a lot of practical things in doing this.
They do. And it was actually kind of interesting when we went out, or when I was out there, one of the first days when they were actually tapping the trees, you didn't have to give them any directions. You ask them, okay, this is a drill. Do you know what to do with it, or how to use it? And they're like, oh, yep. And they just go and they would start tapping trees. So it's a big